Hi, my name is Maya Martin, and I'm the founder and executive director of PAVE, which stands for Parents Amplifying Voices in Education. And we work here in DC to connect, inform, and empower parent leaders to give families in DC a voice and a choice in the vision for education in our city. And in that vision, what we imagine is that parents are partners and leaders in creating a diversity of great, safe, and nurturing schools for every child in every ward and community. I think that what was amazing was that one, the engagement of the families, right? So part of the success of the project was really having families come together, and they met for 2 to 3 hours at a time every other Saturday, that they were giving of their time to craft a school that they knew oftentimes their children wouldn't even necessarily be able to attend. For the military families that were a part of the project, they get orders that transfer them every 2 years, so they knew that likely by the time the school opened, they would have left the area. For the Ward 8 families, I think some of them had kids who were in high school, right? So like they didn't know what grade levels the school would wind up serving, and they wanted to be reflective of what the community wanted in terms of that. But what they were committed to was creating a great school for all kids. And I think that's what's amazing when you talk about parent leaders, is that yes, as a parent, they are advocates for their child, but it's transformational and they become advocates for all children, and they are willing to give so much of their volunteer and limited time in order to make that a reality, not just for their kid, but for all kids in their community. I think it was amazing to watch families come together who previously thought that they probably had more differences and similarities, and through the project they learned that everybody cares about the same thing, which is their child, and finding a great school for that child and making sure that that school fits every child. I think the last part of that was amazing was that we got 5 responses from operators, both local and national. And so it meant that the parents had crafted an RFP that operators wanted to respond to, that they felt like was a real project that they wanted to engage in, and that they wanted to work with these families, to watch the families interview the operators, where they were really forefront, and the operators were answering their questions and their concerns, was amazing. So really you had parents leading the way, which I hadn't seen something like that done in the city, and so in that way I think it was a huge success. I think for both populations they understood that they had transient student populations. Both Ward 8, oftentimes students are transferring schools, there's a lot of housing instability, so it's not like they're in a consistent space or place. And the families understood that about the families in their community in Ward 8. In addition, for the military families, because they get transferred every 2 years, they understood that students were going to be coming in and out of the building. So they were trying to look for an operator who understood that for both populations, that the transience was something that you had to understand was going to really happen, and how did you then take care of every child to make sure that they were getting the growth that they needed. I think the other part of that is making sure that you're bringing together 2 different groups of students who might not have interacted before. Oftentimes, your families in Ward 8 are almost 100% African American. They're oftentimes multi-generational residents of the city, and there is a large amount of poverty east of the river, and so you have families who have some of these kind of unstable home environments. When you're talking about the military, you've got larger families, they've often homeschooled, they're from the middle of the country many times, and now they're traveling all around to these different bases, and oftentimes they're white, right? So you have these 2 different groups of families that are coming together, and so the families were also interested in how do we make sure there are no achievement gaps inside of that, and how are we making sure that we're taking care of both sets of kids culturally, that they feel like they're a part of one school community. And so they really look for operators who are going to build that and build that kind of strength in the kids. I think what really appealed to the parents when they were reading the applications was that the operators basically said, we're going to take care of all kids. Like those were the ones that rose to the top, right? Where it wasn't about, where it was, they acknowledged that there might be certain achievement gaps in different academic data and results, but that at the end of the day, they have done a good job and they have proof that they can do that work for all kids, regardless of background. And I think the parents really responded well to that. Parents first want to be informed, right? As much as they want to make decisions, they want to make informed decisions. And the difference is they don't do this with their full-time job, so they want you to give them the information in order when they're making decisions to have those based in policy and practice. And so part of what we did was bring in different experts to talk to families about, here, before you even craft the finance components of the RFP, let's talk to you about finance so that you understand what a debt-to-income ratio is, and all of these different metrics that are not, you don't use in your personal finance necessarily. And so families were learning all of that, and then they were crafting their RFP. And so as opposed to, kind of when you just say, throw all the spaghetti at the wall. It was a much more tailored process that allowed parents to build their capacity and their knowledge, so that then as they were writing the RFP, it was based in fact and based in information. And so we never really had any concerns. And more of what I found and what I was really excited about is that they pushed my thinking around certain things. When we looked at the charter application process for PCSB, for the Public Charter School Board, because the operator would need to go through the same piece, they wanted to make sure that whatever they put together mimicked that it wasn't too far removed from the process that they were going to have to go to get a charter approved. And what we found was that sometimes parents are like, but it's missing something. And a lot of that was actually around culture. It was around some of those components that parents really care about, like uniforms and food, and not saying that they're dictating what it needs to look like, but they want to know what you plan to do around those things, because they hear those things from their students, right? So students care about those pieces. And so it really pushed in terms of my thinking, in terms of what was important to families that I might not prioritize as a policymaker or as someone who managed in the building, but that families and children really care about.